Billionaire sees Waitress give her umbrella to soaked school kids when lightning strikes near her. He runs to help. What if someone who's spent their entire life fighting for survival had to decide whether to let go of their anger and trust? Again, Madison Collins was a warrior in a city that never slept. Her life a relentless battle against the odds. At 26, she was a mosaic of grit and quiet sacrifice. Her days stitched together by necessity. Her mornings began at 4 a.m. in the humid, flour-dusted kitchen of Bella's Bakery in Brooklyn, where the air was thick with the scent of yeast and sugar. Her hands, once delicate with a sketchbook, were now rough with calluses, kneading dough until her knuckles ached and her forearms burned. She shaped sourdough loaves and delicate pastries for customers who never saw her face, their morning coffee sweetened by her labor but not her name. By noon, she traded her apron for a faded waitress uniform at Rosie's Diner, a gritty midtown haunt where the coffee was bitter and the customers often sharper. There, she navigated a maze of impatient regulars, balancing trays of greasy eggs and scalding coffee while dodging complaints and grabbing hands. Her sneakers, worn thin, bore the weight of 12-hour shifts, her feet screaming with every step. Her nights belonged to Ethan, her 16-year-old brother, whose autism painted the world in vibrant, overwhelming hues. Their apartment, a fifth-floor walk-up in a crumbling brownstone, was a testament to their survival. The walls were marred with water stains, the furniture sagged under years of use, and the kitchen faucet dripped with maddening persistence. Ethan's corner was the only burst of lifestar charts and posters of nebulae taped haphazardly, a telescope he'd built from a kit they'd saved for months to buy. Watching him trace constellations with his finger, murmuring Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major in a soft, rhythmic cadence, was the only time Madison saw him truly still. Those moments were her anchor, the reason she pushed through when her body begged for rest. But survival was a merciless taskmaster. The bills were a rising tide: rent, utilities, Ethan's therapy sessions, which Medicaid only partially covered, his meltdowns, triggered by crowded subways or sudden noises, required specialized care that stretched her budget to breaking. She'd given up art school years ago, her dreams of cityscapes and portraits buried in a box under her bed, alongside her mother's old sketchbooks. Her hands, once nimble with charcoal, were now rough from scrubbing tables. Her hazel eyes, once bright with ambition, were shadowed by sleepless nights and the endless math of stretching every dollar. She'd sold her mother's jewelry to cover medical bills, each piece a shard of memory pawned for survival. Ethan needed her, and that was enough. It had to be. Madison's life was a tapestry of small surrenders. She'd skipped meals to afford Ethan's sensory toys, worked double shifts to cover rent, and smiled through exhaustion to keep him calm. Her only indulgence was a sketchpad she kept hidden, where she'd draw on stolen moments: Ethan's telescope, the city skyline at dusk, the faces of strangers at the diner. Each sketch was a rebellion against her circumstances, a quiet claim to a self she feared was slipping away. The afternoon the storm hit, Madison was already unraveling. Her shift at Rosie's had been brutal. A spilled tray of coffee soaked her apron, a toddler's meltdown drowned out her orders, and a regular left a penny as a tip with a smirk that stung. The rain started as she stepped outside, a drizzle that turned vicious within minutes. As if the sky had a score to settle, her umbrella, a flimsy $5 purchase from a bodega, strained against the wind as she trudged toward the subway, her sneakers squelching in puddles. The city was a blur of gray, the skyline swallowed by clouds that churned like an angry sea dot at the corner of 34th and Lexington. She saw them, a group of school children, no older than 10, huddled under the flimsy overhang of a bus stop. Their backpacks sagged, soaked through, and their thin jackets clung to their shivering frames. One girl, her braids plastered to her face, clutched a drenched notebook, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. A boy with fogged glasses hugged his knees, his eyes darting to the empty street where the bus should have been. Madison's heart twisted. She knew that looked the same when Ethan wore when the world became too loud, too bright, too much. She glanced at her watch. Ethan's aide, Rosa, would leave in an hour, and he struggled with transitions, his meltdowns unpredictable, without her there to guide him. But the kids' faces held her in place, their vulnerability a mirror to her brother's. Her umbrella wobbled in her grip, the wind threatening to rip it apart. Without a word, she walked over and held it out. "Take it," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain's roar. The crying girl blinked up at her, confused. "But you'll get wet." Madison forced a smile, her lips chapped from the cold. "I'm already wet." "Keep it." The girl's small hand closed around the handle, and the other kids crowded under the umbrella, their chatter a mix of gratitude and disbelief. The boy with glasses mumbled a shy thank you, his voice almost lost in the storm. Madison didn't wait for more. She turned back into the deluge, pulling her hoodie tighter. The rain stinging her face like needles. It was just another sacrifice, another moment of putting others first. She was used to it. A block away, lightning cracked, so close the ground seemed to shudder. Madison flinched, her pulse spiking. She quickened her pace, her sneakers splashing through puddles that soaked her jeans to the knees. Another bolt lit the sky, the air humming with electricity. She thought she heard someone call her name, a faint shout swallowed by the storm. Impossible, she was alone, wasn't she? Jared Fields was a man who owned the world but felt its emptiness. At 32, he was the youngest CEO of Fields Tech, a tech empire that reshaped industries with AI and renewable energy. His days were a whirlwind of boardrooms, billion-dollar deals, and the constant hum of ambition. His name graced Forbes lists, his face adorned tech magazines. But beneath the tailored suits and calculated charm, Jared was restless. Success had come at a cost. Friends traded for allies, family for power. His parents, cold and distant, had raised him to see people as assets or liabilities, a lesson he'd internalized too well. His Manhattan penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and sterile decor, was a monument to his achievements, but a cage for his soul. That afternoon, stuck in traffic as the storm raged, Jared sat in the back of his limo, his phone buzzing. With emails he ignored, his driver, Marcus, muttered about delays. But Jared's attention was elsewhere. Through the tinted window, he saw her, a woman in a soaked hoodie, holding an umbrella over a group of kids at a bus stop. She handed it over without hesitation, then turned back into the rain, her shoulders hunched against the deluge. The act was so simple, so selfless, it hit him like a shockwave. In his world of calculated moves and hidden agendas, her gesture was a rare spark of something real, a reminder of a humanity he'd buried under ambition. Lightning struck again, closer. This time, the air crackling with danger. The woman flinched but kept walking, unaware of how close the bolt had come. Jared's hand was on the door before he could think. "Sir," Marcus said, glancing back. Jared didn't answer. He pushed the door open, rain pelting his face as he stepped out. His Armani jacket was soaked in seconds, but he didn't care. He ran toward her, pulling the jacket off and throwing it over her shoulders. "Hey," he shouted over the storm. "You're gonna get yourself killed out here." She spun around, eyes wide, her dark hair plastered to her face. "What the hell?" she snapped, shrugging off the jacket. It fell to the ground, instantly soaked. "I don't need your help." Jared froze, caught off guard by her fire. "You're walking in a lightning storm. Let me at least get you somewhere dry." She glared, her hazel eyes sharp with suspicion. "I'm fine. Go back to your fancy car." But Jared didn't move. Something about her, the defiance, the exhaustion etched into her face, made him stay. He picked up the jacket, holding it out again. "Please," he said, softer this time. "Just take it." She hesitated, her breath visible in the cold air. Then, with a reluctant sigh, she grabbed the jacket, wrapping it around herself. "Fine, but don't expect me to thank you." Madison didn't trust Jared Fields. She didn't trust the way his dark eyes studied her, like she was a riddle he was determined to crack. She didn't trust his polished voice or the way he seemed unfazed by the storm, as if the world bent to his will. But she was cold, soaked to the bone, and Ethan was waiting. So when Jared offered her a ride, she swallowed her pride and climbed into the limo, her wet clothes leaving a puddle on the leather seat. The warmth of the car was almost suffocating after the chill of the rain. Jared sat across from her, his white shirt clinging to his chest, his dark hair damp and tousled. He didn't look like a billionaire in that moment, just a man, slightly disheveled, watching her with an intensity that made her uneasy. "Where to?" he asked. "Brooklyn, Clinton Street," she said, her voice clipped. She didn't owe him conversation. He nodded to Marcus, who eased the car into traffic. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the patter of rain on the roof. Madison stared out the window, her mind racing. She'd seen men like him before, rich, charming, thinking they could buy their way into her life. She wasn't interested. "I'm Jared, by the way," he said, breaking the silence. "Madison," she muttered, not looking at him. "What you did back there," he said, "with the kids. That was kind." She shrugged, her guard still up. "They needed it more than me." Jared leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Not many people would do that. Most would just keep walking." "Yeah, well, I'm not most people." Her tone was sharp, but she felt a flicker of something, curiosity. Maybe when he didn't flinch at her words. Over the next few weeks, Jared became a persistent shadow. He showed up at Rosie's with a new umbrella, claiming it was better than that cheap thing you gave away. He offered to drive her to Ethan's therapy appointments. His limo a surreal contrast to the crowded subway. He sent groceries to her apartment, fresh produce, snacks. Ethan loved packages arriving with no note but his name on the label. Each gesture chipped away at her defenses, but Madison held firm. She didn't need his pity, and she didn't trust his motives. One evening, as she locked up the diner, Jared was waiting outside, leaning against a street lamp. The city glowed behind him, a mosaic of lights and shadows. "You don't make this easy, do you?" he said, a half smile tugging at his lips. "Why should I?" She shot back. "I don't know you, and I don't need your charity." "It's not charity," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I see you, Madison. I see how hard you fight for your brother, for yourself. I want to help." She crossed her arms, her heart warring with itself. "People like you don't help people like me without wanting something." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Maybe I just want to know you." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Madison felt a crack in her armor, a dangerous flicker of trust she wasn't ready to embrace. She turned away, her breath shaky, and walked into the night, leaving him standing under the street lamp. That the turning point came on a quiet evening at the diner, the air thick with the scent of fried onions and stale coffee. Jared had become a regular, sitting in a corner booth with his laptop, nursing a coffee he barely drank. The other waitresses whispered about him. "Is that Jared Fields, the tech guy?" But Madison ignored them. She was wiping down tables when he approached, his expression hesitant, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Somewhere private?" She sighed but led him to the back, near the kitchen where the hum of the fryer drowned out the world. "What is it?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she hadn't seen before. "I know about your mother, Clara." Madison froze, her blood turning to ice. "What?" "I didn't know at first," he said quickly, "but I looked into it. My family, they employed her years ago. She worked for us as a housekeeper. I was just a kid, but I remember her. She was kind. She used to sneak me cookies when my parents weren't looking. She'd hum these old jazz tunes while she worked." Madison's hands clenched into fists, her nails biting into her palms. "Don't talk about her like you knew her." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "I know what happened. The accident. My family, they didn't handle it right. They should have done more. I should have done more." Her mother's face flashed in her mind. Clara, with her warm smile and tired eyes, working long hours for the Fields family, driving home late on icy roads to be with her kids. The accident had been sudden, a truck skidding on black ice, a collision that stole her life. The Fields had sent a check, a cold $5,000 to cover funeral expenses, but no one had come to the service. No one had called. To them, Clara was just the help, a line item in their budget. "You think saying sorry fixes it?" Madison's voice trembled, anger and grief colliding. "Your family treated her like she was nothing. She worked herself to death for you people, and when she died, you didn't even blink." "I was 14, Jared. 14. Burying my mom while your family was throwing some gala in the Hamptons. Jared's face fell. His eyes shadowed with guilt. I didn't. No, Madison. I was a kid. But I know now, and I'm trying to make it right. For you, for Ethan. Make it right. She laughed, a bitter sound. You can't bring her back. You can't undo what your family did. And now you think you can waltz into my life with your money and your guilt and fix it. I don't think that, he said, his voice breaking. I see how hard you're fighting, and I want to help. You and Ethan deserve better. Stop. She cut him off, tears burning her eyes. I don't need your help. I don't need you. She turned away, her heart pounding, and stormed back to the diner floor. But as she wiped down tables with shaking hands, something cracked inside her, a wall she'd built years ago, now trembling. Under the weight of his words, she hated him for stirring up the past, for making her feel seen, for making her want to believe he was different. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk of emotions. Madison avoided Jared, changing her shifts at the diner to dodge his visits. But he was relentless. He sent a note through Marcus, offering to fund Ethan's therapy for a year, no strings attached. He showed up at the bakery with a sketchbook, its leather cover embossed with her initials, saying he'd found it in a shop and thought she'd like it. He sent a telescope for Ethan, one far better than the kit they'd pieced together, with a note that read, for the stargazer. Each gesture was a quiet plea. But Madison's anger kept her distant. Her mother's memory was a wound that never healed, and Jared was a reminder of everything she'd lost. Yet, she couldn't deny the pull. He wasn't like the men she'd known, arrogant, entitled, expecting something in return. Jared was patient, persistent, and maddeningly sincere. One afternoon, he showed up at the park where she took Ethan to unwind, sitting on a bench as Ethan rambled about black holes. Jared listened, asking questions with genuine interest. And Ethan, who rarely connected with strangers, smiled, a real smile, not the polite one he used to mask discomfort. When Jared helped her carry groceries up 5 flights of stairs, laughing when the bag split and oranges rolled everywhere, Madison felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. But hope was dangerous. It made her vulnerable, and vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. She started noticing things about Jared: the way his smile faltered when he talked about his parents, the way his hands fidgeted when he was nervous, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. It scared her. How much? She wanted to let him in. Jared, too, was unraveling. Madison was unlike anyone in his world. She didn't care about his wealth or his status. She saw through his polished exterior, challenging him to be more than the sum of his achievements. But the guilt of his family's actions weighed on him. He dug into old records, learning more about Clara's time with the Fields. She'd been more than a housekeeper. She'd been a confidant to his mother, a quiet presence who kept the household running. She'd worked late nights, driving home in the dark to be with her kids. When she died, his parents had treated it like a business. Loss, a minor inconvenience. The more Jared uncovered, the more he realized how deeply their indifference had hurt people. He wanted to make it right, but he didn't know how. One evening, Madison found a package at her door, a small box with a note in Jared's handwriting. I found this in my mother's things. I think it belonged to Clara. Inside was a silver locket engraved with a tiny star, the same one her mother had worn every day. Madison's breath caught, tears spilling as she opened it to find a faded photo of herself and Ethan as children. She didn't know how Jared had found it, but the gesture broke something inside her, not her anger, but her resolve to keep him out. The climax came on a chilly evening in Central Park, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Madison had agreed to meet Jared, more out of exhaustion than desire. They walked in silence, the city's lights twinkling through the bare trees, the weight of their pasts pressing down. Madison's heart was a battlefield, anger at the Fields family, grief for her mother, and a growing affection for Jared that she couldn't deny. She stopped by a frozen pond, turning to face him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice raw. "Why me?" Jared exhaled, his breath visible in the cold air. "Because you're real. Madison, you don't pretend, you don't play games. You gave up your umbrella for those kids without a second thought. I've spent my life surrounded by people who only care about what I can give them. But you make me want to be better. Madison's throat tightened. You don't get it, Jared. Your family destroyed mine. My mom worked herself to death for you people, and when she died, you didn't even blink. I was 14, burying her alone while your family was throwing some gala in the Hamptons. I can't just forget that. I know, he said, his voice breaking, and I can't change what happened. I was a kid, Madison. But that's no excuse. My parents failed your mom, and I failed you by not knowing sooner. But I'm here now. For you. For Ethan. If you'll let me. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the man behind the billionaire, the one who was trying, who was flawed but fighting to be more. Her anger was still there, a smoldering ember, but it was softer now, mingling with something new. Forgiveness, not for him, but for herself. Holding onto the pain was a weight she couldn't carry anymore. She'd spent years fighting for Ethan, for survival. But maybe, just maybe, she could fight for something more. I don't know if I can trust you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But I want to try. Jared's eyes softened, a flicker of hope breaking through. That's all I'm asking for. The resolution wasn't a fairy tale. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping promises. Instead, it was built on small, deliberate steps, each one a bridge over the chasm of their pasts. Jared started by funding a scholarship in Clara's name, a program to support low-income workers pursuing education. He didn't tell Madison. At first, letting her discover it through a letter from the foundation. When she confronted him, tears in her eyes, he just shrugged and said, it felt right. The gesture wasn't about erasing the past, but about honoring it. A step toward healing. Madison began to let him in, slowly, cautiously. They took Ethan to the planetarium, Jared asking questions as Ethan explained the stars with a passion that lit up the room. They cooked dinner in her tiny kitchen, laughing when Jared burned the pasta and Ethan declared it edible, barely. They freely talked about their fears, their regrets, their hopes. Madison started sketching again, her fingers rediscovering the joy of creation. She drew Ethan's telescope, the city skyline at dusk, even Jared's face, his eyes, soft in a way she hadn't noticed before. Each sketch was a reclaiming of a piece of herself she'd thought was lost. Jared, too, was changing. He started questioning the world he'd built, the empire that thrived on competition and control. He spent less time in boardrooms and more time with Madison and Ethan, finding meaning in their small, messy moments. He helped Ethan build a model rocket, their hands sticky with glue as they laughed over a lopsided fin. He sat with Madison on her fire escape, sharing stories of his own fractured childhood. The parents who saw him as an extension of their legacy rather than a son. For the first time, he felt like he belonged somewhere, not because of what he could offer, but because of who he was. But the path wasn't smooth. Madison's trust was fragile, tested by moments of doubt. When Jared offered to pay for Ethan's college fund, she bristled, fearing it was pity. When a tabloid published a photo of them together, speculating about the billionaire's new fling, she retreated, her old fears of being used resurfacing. Each time, Jared stayed, proving his commitment not with money, but with presence, showing up at Ethan's school play, helping Madison fix a broken shelf, listening when she needed to vent. The final scene unfolded on a quiet morning in Brooklyn, the city waking under a crisp autumn sky. The storm that had brought them together was a distant memory, replaced by a dawn that painted the rooftops gold. Madison, Jared, and Ethan stood on the roof of her building, a thermos of coffee between them. Ethan pointed at the fading stars, naming them with a quiet intensity: Vega, Altair, Deneb. Madison's hand brushed Jared's, and she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, a silent promise. They weren't perfect. The pain of Clara's loss still lingered, a quiet ache that would never fully fade. Jared's family was still a shadow, their influence a reminder of the world he was trying to leave behind. But together, Madison and Jared were building something new, a future where Ethan could chase his stars, where Madison could sketch her dreams, where Jared could be more than his name. They stood side by side, facing the uncertainty of tomorrow. But for the first time, they weren't facing it alone. As the sun rose, Casting long shadows across the city, Madison felt a weight lift. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living for Ethan, for herself, and for the fragile, beautiful possibility of what could be. She looked at Jared, his face soft in the morning light, and smiled, a real smile, the kind she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," she whispered, not for the money or the gifts, but for seeing her, for staying. Jared squeezed her hand, his own smile mirroring hers. "Always."